Okay, I'm going to start by gluing the pattern piece onto the front part of the box card. And I will start by lining up the circle area at the top, and then I will make sure that there's an even border all the rest of the way around. And I'll do the same with the side panel, keeping the tops and the bottoms equal. Now on the back, for this back panel, I'm not going to glue it on yet because that's where part of the light feature is going to go. I will glue on the side panel, making sure that everything remains even. I'm going to take the battery button box that I'm going to use for my light up feature and just draw it onto the back panel. Then use my X-Acto knife, and I am going to cut that out so that I have a hole that matches the battery holder I'm going to be using. And then I'm also going to go and draw that onto the back panel itself. Then I'm going to draw the positive and negative positions. Next, I'm going to assemble the inside parts of the box. This is the Santa. I'm going to glue the white layer onto the red layer, just using some liquid glue. And then I'm going to carefully put that on to match up the different pieces. Now in the extras folder, I found another piece that seems to go along with this Santa. And so I'm going to use this to shore up the entire panel and make it more sturdy. And so I will carefully glue that onto the back. So now this will basically be 3 layers of cardstock, which will make this panel much more sturdy. Now for the back panel, there wasn't anything in the extras folder for that, so I just duplicated this, and on the duplicate I cut off the flaps at the side, and now I'm gluing them together, and so this will add some rigidity to this back panel. All right, the first thing I want to do is I want to check out my LED lights. So I've got my battery holder here with a switch. I've got this connected to my first LED, and then I've jumpered from the first LED to the second LED with just some bare wire, just to make sure it works. And so these are red LEDs, and we'll see how those work. Okay, now I want to actually plan out how the circuit is going to go on this panel. And once the circuit is on, that back panel is going to cover most of it. But I've labeled my lines as positive and negative, and I've just kind of penciled in. I'm going to be using 3 LEDs. And now I'm going to use some double conductive copper tape. And I'm going to go first from the positive and carefully fold over the bottom. And to change direction, I fold it back on itself and then send it. Now I am shoring it down with my bone folder so that it has a good connection. Now I'm going to do the same with the negative, and folding it back to get it to change direction, and folding it back to get it to go around that corner. I'm basically going to want to make sure that tape ends up where the LEDs will be. And now I'm buffing it down with my bone folder to make sure it is good and sealed to the paper. I'm going to do a preliminary testing of it just to make sure everything is working. And so I'm put the battery in, and I put an LED, and it appears to be working. Okay, and here you can see the pattern paper and glitter paper panels that are for the inside and outside will actually hide most of the wiring features. Okay, and I'm going to try and use some conductive thread, which is normally used when you're going to have some light up features in some clothing. And so I'm cutting a length of thread that's about twice the length, total length that I'm going to need. And I'm threading it on a needle. And I'm removing the battery. And this is the battery holder and the LEDs that I'm going to be using for this project. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to go 3 loops through the negative. And I'm holding the thread taut. Then I'm going to tie some slip knots in there, or some knots. And then the tail of the thread I'm going to tape to the back of the battery holder and trim off the edge. And do the same thing with the positive side. Loop it around 3 times, keeping it taut, then tie a knot. And tape the tail to the back of the battery holder and trim off the edge. And I'm making sure that the thread is not touching. The positive and negative does not touch anywhere. And I'm using some E6000 on the back of the battery holder and placing it down into position. And just kind of holding it there for a little bit. I was going to clamp it, but without the battery in there, it would have smashed down the battery holder too much. So I'm just going to tape it down a little bit because the E6000 hasn't cured yet, and so this battery holder still will slide around quite a bit. Now I'm going to tape this thread onto the copper tape that I previously put down. And once again, I'm being very careful that the positive and negative threads don't touch each other. I'm keeping them separated. And I'm going to weigh this down for a few minutes with some stamping blocks, just to give that E6000 a little bit more time to cure. Now I'm going to put the first LED on, and so I am going to thread it 3 times through the negative side of the LED, keeping my thread as taut as possible, and then I will tie a knot. And then repeat the process on the positive side of the LED. Looping it 3 times through, keeping the thread taut, and then I'll tie a knot. Then I'll use, and then I tape the thread into place. And then I'll use a toothpick to apply a little bit of the E6000 to the back of that LED and hold it down. And then I'll weigh it down for a few minutes with some stamping blocks. Then I'm going to go on to the next LED. So I'll tape the thread down to the copper tape, loop it 3 times through the negative, then tie a knot, and do the same with the positive side. Loop it 3 times, then I'll tie a knot, use a little bit of the E6000 to secure the LED down to the cardstock. Need a little more E6000. I'll weigh it down for a few minutes. And we'll go on to our last LED, starting with the negative. Loop it 3 times. Then I'll tie a knot. And same with the positive side. Put a little bit of E6000 onto the back of the LED and weigh it down for a few minutes. I'm going to cut off the ends and tape those down. And I'm going to put the batteries in, kind of check. And initially I seem to be having some problems. It doesn't seem to light up, so I'm going to put some wire glue onto each of the connections. So I'll use a toothpick and put a little on the positive and negative on the button battery holder, and the same with the positive and negative of each of the LEDs. And I'm being careful that I only put enough to fill the holes of those LEDs so that the wire glue doesn't touch. Then I'm going to hold everything down with some tape. And then I put the battery in, clamp it down, and it seems to be working now. And now I'm going to let this wait overnight to cure. Okay, I've let this sit overnight to let the E6000 cure really well. And let's see how it works. Yeah, seems to be working real well. And now I'm going to glue the back panel on, lining everything up. And then I'll glue the 2 panels together. And for the inside panel, I'm going to just place it on top, turn off the lights, turn on the LEDs, and trace where the positions are. Then I'm going to use a small circle die to cut those holes out where the LEDs are with my die cutting machine. And so now I have my 3 holes cut out, and I'm going to glue this panel onto the inside. And now I'll put the interior panels on. So for the Santa panel, I'm going to put glue on the one side, and I'm going to line it up with that second score line on the right. And the back panel, I'm going to line up with that first score line on the right-hand side. And then I'm going to fold them both over with the back panel, the tab open, and the Santa panel, the tab is folded inward. And then I'm going to connect it to that side panel and then connect the 2 boxes together. Okay, with the red background, unfortunately, you can't really see the lights when it's bright in the room. But when you turn off the lights, even though you can't see it very well in this view, I'll shoot it again with my cell phone, and you'll see how pretty it is in a darker room. And here is the final box card with the one on the left, the lights are off, and the one on the right, the lights are on. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.